Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel. We've done quite a bit of leather work here, both tanning and making stuff, and today we want to talk about maintenance and cleaning of leather goods. So you tan your leather, or you buy your leather, you make a thing or buy a thing, and then you take it out into the world and stuff happens. Mud puddles happen, spilled coffee happens, maybe even it gets damp in your luggage and it's a few days before you realize it. Not that that would ever happen, but that happens. Right, so we need to be able to clean our leather goods. And we're going to talk about cleaning leather goods from two different perspectives. The first, there's this little shoulder bag that I got at I traded for this at a powwow a couple weeks ago. And it's in very good condition, but it's been stored for a while, right? So this is going to get a very light, very simple, slightly dusty from the attic wipe down. Okay, and I'll talk about how to do that. We also want to look at the hinge points on this, where this top flap comes up, and then this is a double pocket pouch, so where that opens. Okay, those hinge points are showing signs of getting a little bit dry and cracky. Okay, not real bad yet. They haven't actually cracked fully yet, but I want to keep that from happening. So we're just going to do a little bit of a little wipe down, a little bit of dressing, and I'll show you how to make your own leather dressings. Okay? And then this guy that might have laid wet in some luggage for 4 days, this little long bag, this got a bloom of green mold on it. Okay, so this needs a thorough washing out, a thorough laundering. And I'm going to show you how to do a thorough laundering on leather. Okay? First, that's going to be this. I'm going to completely disassemble. I'm going to pull this seam out, flatten it out, and then we'll launder it. Now, types of leather that this stuff applies to. What I'm going to talk about today applies to all of your common veg tan, chrome tan, alum tan. Okay? All of those will work with these processes. What we're not talking about is, first of all, brain tan and like old-fashioned chamois cloth oil tan. Can you toss me a brain tan there, hon, from the stack? Brain tan from the stack. Okay, there we go. Right, so this brain tan hide, if this gets dirty, you could just launder this as though it was your favorite knit wool sweater that your grandma made you. Okay? Gentle detergent by hand in a bucket, dry it out, stretch it a little bit when it's done. If it gets lightly dirty, just a bucket of warm water, right? Warm, not hot. If it's bad for your hide, it's bad for your hide. Okay, so baby bottle warm is where you want to go with that. So that's simple, right? The washing instructions for brain tan, very simple, don't need a video. Okay? Pretend it's a wool sweater. But these other kinds of leathers need a little bit more consideration. What we're also not talking about are fancy garment leathers. Okay, so we're not talking about your wool coat. Your fur coat. So if you have a fur coat or a fur hat or something like that, that needs very special conditions. First of all, you've got to consider the fur. A lot of furs will felt. So, you know, what the leather needs and what the fur need might be completely different things. And professionally made fur garments tend to have all sorts of linings and insulation layers, and all of those may need their individual treatment, right? And what's good for the leather and what the leather needs and what the fur can tolerate might leach the dye in your lining, and then it discolors your fur, right? So those things, if you have like a lined fur coat and it needs laundered, probably you're taking it apart and washing the layers separately and reassembling the garment. That needs professionally done, right? We're not talking about that. We're also not talking about fancy finished and waxed leathers. So a lot of leathers have a wax coating, which will get creases and look kind of rustic and worked in, right? And anything like that that has a wax exterior finish, okay? What we're going to do for the thorough laundering of this piece, we'll remove that finish, and it will be a different looking piece of leather when you're finished, okay? So again, if we're eroding wax from the surface and it's lined, you could deposit that wax on the lining, which ain't good, okay? and it's going to change the characteristics of the item that you're working with. So those more complex types of material, they're their own thing. We're not talking about those. What we are talking about are like your simple leathers, simple bags, simple belts, simple things like that, right? Simple harness leathers, like horse harness, what we're talking about certainly applies to. All of those sorts of simple, uncomplicated leathers you can apply either of these two methods to, depending on how nasty or scuzzy they've gotten. And the worst case scenario is a little bit of the dye washes out and the piece of leather is a half a shade lighter than when you started. Not a big deal, okay? But don't apply this to the more complicated types of leather. The results are not predictable. It might go fine. It might go fine, but the results are not predictable. So we're going to start with the bag. Talk about that. We're going to make our own leather dressings. I'll show you how to do that. And then we'll do a thorough laundering on this piece that got a little moldy. Okie dokie, we've got everything we need to make our homemade saddle soap in preparation to clean that little shoulder bag. We have water, we have grated bar soap, and we have neat's foot oil. Now, water should be wet. Make sure you get wet water. Like any wet water will work. Bar soap. The simpler the bar soap, the better. So we don't want a laundry bar with a lot of ingredients. You want a simple lye and tallow soap, because your ideal mixture is to have animal fats predominate. Okay, we want fats that won't oxidize. Okay, I'll talk about that a little bit more with the neat's foot oil, but we want fats that won't oxidize. Lard and tallow are good. They're what you want to be the most of your soap. Naphtha soap, right? The old-fashioned Naphtha bar soap, it's pretty much just lye and tallow. That's what I recommend. I make my own. This is just cow tallow saponified with lye, right? So that's 2 ingredients in that soap. The closer you can get to 2 ingredients, the better. And then we want a liquid oil. This is where we want to make sure we have something that won't oxidize. So oils that oxidize can be useful in the initial tanning process. Okay, they will produce acids, aldehydes, and ketones in the oxidation process. And the more unsaturated your fat, the easier it is to oxidize. Highly oxidizable liquid oils, such as linseed oil and fish oil, have a place in tanning, because in an oil tanning process, you want those oils to oxidize because you're counting on those aldehydes and acids to do the tanning for you. Okay? But when something's already tanned and finished, we don't want to keep producing more and more acids. It will eventually degrade the leather. So that's why we don't want a lot of vegetable oils, fish oils, or highly unsaturated oils in any of these things. Okay? Neat's foot oil is the best liquid oil for this process. It's animal-based, it will mix well with anything residual in the skin, and it's not highly oxidizable. If you look at this, you can see there's 2 layers. This is neat's foot oil that I rendered myself, so I know it is absolutely 100% pure neat's foot oil. It's not a neat's foot oil compound that has who knows what other stuff mixed in. The sediment that you see at the bottom is a little bit of tallow that went through the cheesecloth when I filtered this stuff. I have videos on how I render neat's foot oil and how I make this soap on our channel, and I'll make sure that both of those links are in the end screen at the conclusion of this video if you want to see how to make your own stuff from scratch. I have literally 0 money in this project because I've made all of this stuff myself. Just loosen that. We want equal parts of these 3 ingredients. So I have about a spoonful of grated bar soap. I'm going to add about a spoonful of water. Now, normally I like to use warm water, and then I'll walk away from this for a half hour or so till it softens and liquefies. Then I'll go for the neat's foot oil. But here, since we're videoing, I'm just going to go right for the neat's foot oil. Wasn't quite a full spoon. Get a little bit more. Stuff is quite a lot of work to render, so I don't want to waste any of it. Okay. And now, mix this up. And I am going to walk away from it. It's ready, so these clumps will take a little bit to dissolve. And soap, what makes soap is that it can dissolve in both oil and water. Okay, so it is the meeting point of oil and water. Therefore, both the oil and the water will help those clumps dissolve. Okay? And when all of it's dissolved in here, it will have a consistency pretty close to hand cream. So you can either, you can crush it and stir it and whisk it and beat it into submission. Or you can just kind of mix it together, walk away for a half hour, and then come back when it's the consistency of skin lotion. Here's our stuff. I walked away and had lunch and came back, and you can see this nice consistency. Okay? There were a couple of lumps, and I spent a minute or two just kind of smashing lumps with the back of the spoon, but that's no big deal. Now, if you don't have or can't get, for whatever reason, real 100% neat's foot oil, not like neat's foot oil compound, that has a lot of other junk in it, and they don't tell you what it is. Maybe it's fine for this, maybe it's not. They don't tell you. One of my personal pet peeves are mixed products without an ingredients list. It drives me crazy. I don't use them. But anyway, I'm that guy that as soon as I see the words proprietary blend, I'm done. I'm out. I'll figure another way to do it. But anyhow, I like to know what I'm using. The reason I like to know what I'm using is because if I know what I'm using, I can troubleshoot it. Okay. So this is simple. Saddle soap. When you buy saddle soap, it's in a tub and it's dried down. So if you have extra from this, you can just get like a styrofoam egg crate. Just put this in one of the holes and leave it out and let it dry down, and then you can come back to it. Okay? But here, since it has all the water in it, from that you need the water to get it all mixed up. But because it has all the water in it, it's wet as is. So we're just going to take a little bit of this on a rag. Now I want to try and not get it on that little flannel insert. Just kind of dab the rag a little bit so that it's not super wet. And we're just going to wipe this down. You can see I'm getting a little bit of dirt off of it. It shouldn't be real grimy, but this will be a nice little cleanup. And while I'm doing this, just to note a couple things. The first is, if you don't have or can't get if you don't have or can't get neat's foot oil, or you can't get anything but the neat's foot oil compound, you can use a non-oxidizing vegetable oil. So don't use safflower oil, don't use any nut oil, those will all oxidize and harden. Don't use any of the oils that get rancid easily, but you can use corn or canola. It's not as good as the neat's foot, but you can use it. You could use a liquid palm oil. I'm not sure how coconut oil would work. It's a little bit too heavy. But the more saturated fats are in there, the less it's going to oxidize. So, you want the liquid oils that your cardiologist doesn't want you to eat. Those are the oils that are best for this project. Now, when we go to the inside, start working on these surfaces, you can see, all leather has a grain side and a flesh side. We don't want to do this on the flesh side. It'll absorb too much of the oil. So we're just going to leave all of those flesh side surfaces unscrubbed. And that's okay because this thing isn't super dirty. We're just giving it a little bit of a shine up. And it won't take that much time to do. A little bit of sawdust from my workbench, but the soap and water is giving it a little bit of a cleaning action, and the oil residue that we leave behind this way will soak in nice and help make keep the leather nice and supple. That's the cleaning step. Now the last thing we want to do is these hinges right here and then the one on the inside. I will do these yet. I'm going to do that off camera. You get the idea. I will do these strap attachments with the saddle soap. But I'll do that off camera later. However, right on these hinge attachments, I do want to put a little extra oil there because it probably won't pick up on the camera. This is one of the limitations of it's nice to be able to do YouTube because I can share this with people all over the world, but there's some things that are just never going to pick up well on the camera. Well, I can feel, we'll put it that way, I can feel that there's a texture difference right on that hinge versus over here. Okay, and that it's a little rougher right where I'm rubbing my fingers on the hinge and smoother on the flats. Okay, and roughness turns into cracked over time, right? Mm-hmm. So to prevent that, we're just going to make this a little bit more supple. I'm just going to dip my finger in my neat's foot oil and just rub. We don't want a lot, just a finger residue full. Just rub that right over the hinge. Now it's going to look a little bit darker initially, but that'll soak in and the color will even out. I'm going to do the same thing. This time I am going to do a little bit on the flesh side. But not over as wide an area. Just a little bit right on the hinge section. Now I'll do the same in here. Okay. And then flesh side right on top of the hinge. Can you see this, beloved? Right there? Okay. Right there on top of that hinge. We're going to put a little bit more. So that is all that we are doing on this one. A simple scrub with the saddle soap and a little bit of extra neat's foot oil on the spots that get creased. Beloved, could you hand me the egg carton over there? And I'm just going to fill it with the saddle soap. Try to get out as much as I can because that neat's foot oil is precious. It's a lot of work to make that. But there we are. There's a little blob in there. I will leave this open and the water will evaporate out of that little blob and then I'll pop it out. It'll be like a little tray ice cube but it's dried down saddle soap. Okay, so that'll be for another future project. Now we're going to go and do the much more involved process of deep cleaning and truly laundering the other bag that got a bit of mold on it. If you like this pouch, the last video we did on the channel was drawing a pattern and a demonstration of how to take a finished object like this that you buy or trade for or find your DR, so whatever, to take a finished object like this and draw a pattern from it to make more. And that pattern is available on our Patreon. And since this is an unsponsored, unmonetized YouTube channel, we are so grateful for all of our patrons, and there's a lot of great rewards there if you want to join, such as the pattern for this. So we've ripped the seams on this piece of leather. Got a couple of tags hanging on there yet, but we've ripped the seams on this piece of leather so it's nice and flat. You can see what's happened to it. It's gotten some little specks of green mold, like bread mold, that grew on this. If this was black mold, it would be in the trash already. Right? The black mold, the toxic stuff, the spores that'll wreck your lungs, don't even try. Okay? Don't even try. But a little bit of green mold, that's just like the penicillin making mold. I'm not too worried about it. But I do want to thoroughly wash this out, cleanse it, and disinfect it. Okay, so we need a way to disinfect this that is safe for the leather. This piece of leather is, I'm pretty sure it's simple veg tan. It could be chrome followed by, like a chrome pre-treatment followed by a veg tan. They might have done some sort of chrome alum or pickle pre-treatment. I'm not 100% sure. But it's not waxed or treated or had anything done to it outside of the tanning process and some light oiling after. Okay? What I'm about to do, do not, like I said in the intro, do not do this to a fancy or expensive leather jacket. Right? Don't. Maybe it'll be fine, but you're rolling the dice, right? You don't know how it's going to turn out. So if you have like a black leather biker jacket that, like the glossy black leather, don't do this. Patent leather, don't do this. I mean like actual patent leather, not the pleather patent leather. Don't do this. Any of those like waxy, glossy, highly treated, don't do this to anything that's been paint dyed. Don't do this to that real valuable stuff. But simple veg tan, simple alum tan, you can clean. Okay? Take them apart first. Right? Always take your stuff apart first and then reassemble. But if you're hanging out on this channel, we've got lots of leather sewing videos. You should have the skills to dismantle and reassemble a bag. Okay? And if that's not true, then I would recommend still have it professionally cleaned. Okay? Don't get yourself into a project that's going to cost you, an expensive, valuable thing. So our leather's ready. We need to make our wash bath. The first thing is some simple dish soap. We're going to put a good squirt of dish soap in there. Okay? This is going to strip the oils out of the leather, and at the end, we're going to be re-oiling it. Okay, that is part of this. But to thoroughly launder a piece of leather like this, you do need to remove the oils. That's part of laundering. Because the oils will entrap and entrain, grit, dust, and grime, and we want that gone. Okay, so we are going to be de-oiling it and then re-oiling it. And then, because I know I want this disinfected, we need to do that in a way that's safe for the leather. Now, I don't want anything that's going to leave a residue that could cause trouble down the road. Okay? And that rules out most of your disinfectants. But you have to understand, one of the things that's important for living organisms is that they have a constant pH range. Right? So any given cell can only exist and metabolize and go about living within a certain pH range. Okay? Now, there are cells that can exist in a very basic situation, and cells that can exist in a neutral situation, and cells that can exist in a very acidic situation. The extremely basic and extremely acidic ones, tolerant cells, are called extremophiles. But there's nothing that can tolerate extreme acid and extreme base. They have to choose. So to disinfect this, we're going to use a base first. because that'll also help with the detergent action of our initial wash. So, this, when it molded, would be in the neutral condition. So we know that anything nasty which is growing in this right now can tolerate a neutral situation. Okay? So when we go from neutral tolerant grime to a highly basic solution, we will kill the overwhelming majority of anything that would be growing in here. Okay? And then when we wash out the base with an acid, anything which was able to survive both neutral and basic conditions will not survive acidic conditions. So that will wipe it and remove any residual base. Okay? So that's how you disinfect things without caustic disinfectants, is by pH switching. Go to one extreme and then go to the other extreme. Okay? And you will kill almost everything. You won't kill, like, really nasty spores. Okay? Now, for a base that won't leave a residue, you want ammonium. Okay? Lye and lime are basic and will have the same cleansing action if you use them right, but they will leave a residue, and we don't want that. Okay? Ammonium is ammonia that has been dissolved in water. Ammonia is NH3 when that's dissolved, and it's a gas. When that's dissolved in water, it becomes NH4. Okay? So that's your ammonium hydroxide, and it generates the hydroxide ion to make it a base. When this dries, the reverse of that happens. The ammonium converts back to ammonia and evaporates. Okay? So this will not leave a residue. So if when we wash out the acid, if I could get through the adult-proof cap, if when we if when we go and switch to the acid wash, I'm just going to put a good glug in here, make it nice and stinky. If when we go to the acid wash we miss a little bit of the ammonium, it doesn't matter. It'll evaporate and it won't leave a residue in the finished thing at the end of the day. Okay, so that's what we want. What you don't want is one of the glass and surface cleaners that has tetraalkyl ammonium salts. Those will leave a residue and will continue to generate ammonium slowly over time. Okay, so read the ingredients. If it's just ammonium and water, good. If you see N-alkyl ... and you have a word that long, those are your tetraalkyl ammonium salts. Don't use those. Okay, don't use those for this. So, yeah, if you can pronounce it, you're okay. And now we're just going to go in here. We're going to give it a soak in this. You want enough ammonium that it's strongly basic, that you can smell it, but not so much that it's going to burn your hands. Okay? Now, one thing you'll notice is that already you can see the water's darkening. A lot of dyes, and I'm just going to kind of rub this in my hands and scrub it a little bit. Okay? Ooh, that is stinky stuff. A lot of dyes are stable at one pH, but not another. So depending on whether it's an acid-stable dye or a base-stable dye, if it's been dyed with any of your aniline products, one of your washes is going to look real dark. Okay? You're not going to remove all of the dye which is bound in the leather, but you're very quickly going to wash out any residual dye that the dye left in between the fibers. Okay? And this is why sometimes when you do this, depending on what dye was used, it'll come out a little bit lighter than it was initially. Okay? This is also why you don't want to do this with a multi-layer garment, because a lot of that dye is going to come out of the leather and stick to the cloth. Okay? So, know what you're working with, know what's going to happen, and choose wisely. Don't get mad at me if you choose the wrong thing and it doesn't go as planned. Okay? So that's worked in. I'm rubbing it around a little bit. And now this is already burning my nose a little because I put a little bit more of a glug of ammonium than I really needed in this. So I'm going to turn off the camera, take it out on the porch where it won't stink up my house, and let it sit overnight. Good morning. It's a day and a half later. Now, I have to apologize to all you folks that last night when I was going to film the transition from the ammonium to the vinegar bath, we were having some issues with the camera, and I wasn't able to film that, but I had to move this forward or I was going to lose the project. So what I did off camera was I dumped out the bucket of the original wash. I scrubbed the hide really, really well in that original wash after it soaked for a full 24 hours. And then I dumped it out and just rinsed this with a bunch of clean water to get as much of that dye-filled base bath out as possible. And that water got that got dark as ink. Okay, it got dark as any ink. And that's why, well, it's not the only reason why, but that's part of the reason why you really don't want to do this with any product that has multiple layers of different fabrics, okay? Because the dye, they're going to respond differently to these solutions, and at a minimum, the dye that comes out, all that free dye that comes out of the leather is going to stain any cloth or any wool or any fur or anything like that you have in combination, right? So this is for just a sheet of leather, okay? If you're going to do this on a leather good that has multiple layers, you're going to want to take it apart and then reassemble it after you're done. Okay, so that's a bit involved. Now this cleaned up really, really well, and it's been soaking overnight in my vinegar bath, which again, I just put enough water in here to float it, and a couple of glugs of regular old boring white vinegar. Nothing fancy here, okay? This doesn't have to be a real particular concentration. You want it to be a bit acidic, and you want to be able to smell the vinegar, and all we're really doing is removing the ammonium from the leather. And you also don't need to worry too much about overdoing it. It's not going to burn the leather. It's not acidic enough to burn the leather, and the acetic acid evaporates. There won't be any residue. That's why we're using these things that evaporate, so we know at the end of the day there won't be any residue. There will be a little bit of a texture change through this process. Base swells your leather. So after it's been soaking a day, when you first put it in the liquid, it'll feel like a wet fabric. Okay. After it's been soaking a day in the base bath, the first bath that we made, it swells up a bit and gets kind of slimy feeling. Okay. And then after it's been soaking in the vinegar again, it goes back to its normal thickness and feels like wet fabric again. Right. So you'll feel those changes. I can't show you those changes on camera. They're very tactile. They're in your fingertips, right? You got to kind of get in and do some of these things in order to feel, to feel and see. There are things that I can't really show you on camera. So now all we're going to be doing is just kind of wringing this out a little bit because it's ready for drying. Okay. And then we're going to partially dry it. Now, oh, yeah, I just got it wet again. Go me clumsy. So we're going to partially dry it. We're going to have to replace the oils that we removed with all of that soap. If we just dry it down like this, it'll feel like old crispy boot leather, right? Real crunchy and gritty and not nice, right? So we have to re-oil it. It's best to re-oil it when there's still a little bit of moisture in the leather because the oil will distribute more evenly. If you let it dry all the way out and then oil it, right, as soon as you take your paintbrush full of oil and dab it on, it's just going to suck all out. Okay? But we also don't want it dripping wet. So I'm going to just let this sit here on my workbench. There's nothing in this that's going to bother the wood of my workbench, right? So I'm just going to let it sit on my workbench for an hour, maybe 2. And then we'll come out and I'll show you the oiling of this. We're ready to do the next step with this. So it's wet to the touch, but, you know, if I squeeze it, no water is going to come out of it. Okay, so it's at that extremely damp, moderately wet, however you want to think about that. And this is a really good stage to put the oil on it, because when I dip my paintbrush into the neat's foot oil here, it'll spread out. It's not just immediately. You can see the area that's glistening right here. Mm-hmm. It's sitting on the surface a little bit. Whereas if this was all the way dry, as soon as I touched it, it would suck all of the oil out right in that spot and make a really dark spot. Okay, so it's nice to do the oiling while the stuff is still wet. It just spreads out nicer. Okay, and I'm doing this on the flesh side first. Okay. And what I said is especially true on the flesh side, because the grain side, the keratin in the grain will sort of resist absorbing a little bit. Whereas the flesh side is just a sponge. And again, the reason we need to do this is because that first bath with all that dish soap in it and all of that ammonia in it will have stripped every last little bit of oil out of this piece. You can also see that there's some color variation. So it lightened a lot from that bath taking the dye out. And these darker spots are some areas where it didn't lighten as much. Not as much of the dye was removed. So with highly processed leather, that is something that you have to be aware of. And the more extra treatments have been applied to your piece of leather before it came to you, the more change is potentially possible as you wash those treatments out along with all of the grime. Okay? So this is an involved process that, how to say it, I don't want to just say has uncertain results, because in the sense of this is very clean and good as new, the results are certain. But in terms of the before and after aesthetic changes, you don't know what those are going to be.
They're unpredictable.
Yes. And they're unpredictable because you don't know what was done to your leather. You just bought a piece and they're not going to tell you what they did to it. And that's what drives me nuts about proprietary anything. Because when I start messing with it, I don't just take things and use them. I take things and mess with them. Right? And when I'm taking my raw materials and messing with it, I like to know what's going to happen at the end of my having messed with it. And with all these proprietary formulas, you don't. So the closer I can get to having nothing been done to something, the happier I am with it. And that's why I make my own tanning formulas and I make my own leather dressings, and I try to make my own everything where I can, because then I know what's in it, and if something didn't work, I know why. Well, I know where to start troubleshooting because I know exactly what was in there. Right? And that's why as soon as I see proprietary formula on something, I lose interest in it very, very quickly. Now I'm doing the same thing to the grain side. And I don't know how well all of the detail's going to pick up. There's a lot of things that just do not pick up on camera. But as I'm observing what's going on in front of me, I'll describe it to you in words. On the flesh side, when I painted this in, it absorbed slowly, but it definitely absorbed. And from the beginning to the end of that, doing the back of this here, the back side, it went from very shiny, then over 30-40 seconds absorbed, darkened in color as it absorbed, and lost the glisten. Here, it's not absorbing hardly at all. It's just kind of sitting on the surface. Okay. So the back side, the flesh side, gets a very thorough coating with quite a lot of neatsfoot oil being used. Whereas this grain side, we're putting this here because the grain side needs some nourishing with the oils as well. And it'll take a long time for all of that oil to fully infiltrate all the way and soak through to the grain side. So this is going to speed that up. But it's a very, very thin coat that's going on the grain side. And then some patches here where the grain was damaged at the tannery. And this is deer hide. Deer hide, the grain slips away from the flesh side very easily. So, sorry for bumping the camera there, folks. So the if it was in the lime, if they put it in the bucking solution too long, that's where these bold patches come from. There's nothing you can really do to change that. It's just part of the character of the piece once it happens. And I am just fine with my things having some character, so not a big deal to me. Honestly, I kind of like that character, because that's how you know it was something that was handmade and not just machine made. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that all those proprietary formulas out there are bad. They're not. They're very good. They're very good. But I can't leave well enough alone. And being somebody who tinkers and can't leave well enough alone, they don't let me tinker the way I want to.
That's understandable.
That's a me thing. Maybe that's a you thing. Maybe that's just a me thing. Okay. There we go. So we have oiled this piece of leather. And from here, all that it needs to do is dry. Okay. Finish up and look at our final results for both projects. This, nice and clean, and the sun's a little bit bright right here. But if you look in here where I put the neatsfoot oil, okay, when I put the neatsfoot oil in there initially, it was very, very dark. But I did that about, what, 3-4 days ago now?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3-4 days ago or so. And that oil has spread out and fully infiltrated the leather. So there's no discoloration at this point. And you don't get any permanent discoloration from oiling. It will darken it slightly right when you put it on because it looks wet. But it's just looking wet. It's not an actual color change. Okay? So we rubbed a little bit of that in. It had a few days to spread out, soak in, even out. And now the color is right back to where it was. And the same here. There's a little bit of that kind of wet look showing just in there. I can still feel a little bit of the oil. Okay? But that's just fine. Nobody cares about that there anyway. Right? So this looks wonderful. The sheet of leather that we did the thorough cleaning on, okay, came out very nice as well. It's nice and soft and supple, but we do have some color changes. So across most of it, it lightened up quite a bit, okay, because the ammonium, that ammonium wash really does remove a lot of dye. Okay, it really does. So you just have to know that. We can clean the leather. It will still be a beautiful sheet of leather, but it might not be identical to when we start. Okay? And the other thing that happened, and this is kind of a little bit of a shame on me, this pan that I was using to oil it was a poor choice. You can see from the moisture that was there, it got a little bit of bloom rust. And then anywhere that bloom rust touched the leather while it was wet, it got a dark spot. So these dark spots here are from the rust touching the leather. And I did a video a month or two ago on using rust water as a dye for veg tan leather. Okay, because the tannic acid combined with the iron oxide makes a black dye. So everywhere that rust got into the leather, it darkened a little bit. So we have a little bit of a mottled look, a gradient from this side of the sheet to that side of the sheet. So I don't know what I'm going to put this to use on. Maybe I will just work that into a design and just embrace the character. Maybe I'll just do some small things with it and use patches. But either way, we got our sheet of leather back, and we absolutely can do a project with this piece of nice leather. So there's no sign of mold anywhere on it. There's no sign of any discoloration from that little bit of mold or mildew that had grown on it. It is completely clean and good as new, albeit slightly pigmented differently. And this does really illustrate the point I was trying to make early on, that you can absolutely clean leather goods. But when you don't know exactly what processes have been applied, and you don't know what dyes they've used, and you don't know what waxes they've used on the surface, you can't always exactly predict the results of that cleaning aesthetically. Okay? But it's not a big deal. We could take this and use it as is. We could dip it in some of that rust water I showed for make your own black leather dye and turn the whole thing black and just have a black sheet of leather. We could embrace the character, but either way, we have a nice piece of leather again. Now, there's always the question when you're doing this, how much oil is enough, how much is too much? So if you have so much oil on it that oil is leaking out and making oil marks on things that the leather is touching, that's too much, right? That oil will eventually work its way out just from contact with your skin, from contact with dust will absorb it out. Commercial tanneries would run it through a squeezer and squeeze excess oil out, right? Just like a big laundry wringer. And a lot of older traditional methods, if you over oil something, would have you pack it in sawdust for a week, and the sawdust will absorb a lot of that oil out. So that is rectifiable. But it's even easier to go light in the initial coat and then add more. Right. So I think this feels pretty good. Just giving it the squeeze and twist test right here. Just seeing how it feels, how it interacts. It's not crunchy at all. It's soft, it's supple, it's not trying to break. So this feels about right. Now, over the next week or so, that oil will distribute and continue to soak in. So I may come back a week from now and do this test again and think, you know what, that needs a little bit more oil. If that is the case, what I will do is just take the paintbrush again and paint on the grain side a thin film and let it soak in the slow way from the grain side. Because if I flip it over and paint on the flesh side, it's just going to soak it up like a sponge and it will get over oiled. Okay? So I'll do it on the side that is more resistant to oil. And if it only needs a really light coat, you could also take that saddle soap that we made for the first half of this project and just use that on the grain side as well. And that'll give it a very light oiling. So you can always add more. You can take out too much, but it's not as nice as just going light and adding a little bit more if you need it. So that's a judgment call. That's how you want your leather to come out. And how much you oil and what oil you use and how you apply it, those are choices that you can make as a leather worker that will have substantial impacts on the final product that you produce. So I hope that this was useful to some of you folks out there. Yes, you can clean leather goods, but you need to know some things about what you're doing, and I hope this has helped you with that. So if you've enjoyed it, We would love to see you over on the Patreon. This is an unsponsored, unmonetized YouTube channel, and that helps us out so much, and I'm so grateful for everybody who's over there. And we'll see you next time here at Old Ways Rising Farm.